Disconnected deals with the aftermath of the two main stories that 911 Season 8 has been focused on since its return from hiatus. Save for an extended emergency, which features a familiar face, the episode is split between Maddie, Jennifer Love Hewitt, returning to work after being kidnapped, and Eddie, Ryan Guzman, adjusting to life in Texas and attempting to rebuild his relationship with Christopher, Gavin Mayhew. Both stories have strong points, but Maddie's is the more clear-cut winner. When it was teased that Maddie would once again go through a life-threatening ordeal, there was a bit of frustration. The character had already been through enough hardship to last a lifetime, thinking back to her abusive marriage and her postpartum depression, and it seemed a bit repetitive to put her in peril after a happy pregnancy reveal. But the resolution of the kidnapping arc concludes beautifully and justifies it. I don't know that the same could be said, just yet, for Eddie's move away from the 118. Maddie's eager to go back to her job. But she faces a major setback. Maddie, at dispatch, in 911 Season 8, Episode 12. Disconnected begins with Maddie, all smiles, as she returns to her dispatch desk and takes her first call. Despite the cheery song accompanying Maddie as she settles back into a familiar rhythm, there is something off about the scene. Sure enough, it turns out to be a nightmare that ends with Maddie getting her throat slit. She wakes up, startled, and clearly not having yet processed her near-death experience with Amber Brayburn, Abigail Spencer. The next morning, despite admitting to Howard, Kenneth Choi, that she regularly has these same nightmares, Maddie wants to go back to work. The two introductory scenes clarify the stakes well. The nightmare is short and sweet, etched out in broad strokes by director Tessa Blake, particularly in how Maddie's throat is gushing blood as her co-workers smile at her. It's also nice that Howard trusts Maddie's instincts enough not to argue when she says she needs to go back to helping people. Her instincts, all the same, are pretty off. After being greeted by Josh, Brian Sophie, and Sue, Deborah Christopherson, both of whom seem to be unsure of how to ease their friend back into it, Maddie talks to a young boy who's trapped in his apartment. It catches fire after some popcorn-related mishap, and Maddie has to talk him through the steps to safety. Before long, Maddie's voice starts to fade. Within a few minutes, her voice is completely gone. Josh takes over the call, and the 118 is able to save the boy and his father. In a later scene, during a visit to the doctor, it's revealed that Maddie is suffering from psychogenic aphonia. It's a condition wherein the loss of voice is due to intense emotional distress. The doctor recommends that Howard and Maddie try exercises and vocal rest, especially after learning what Maddie has been through. The goal and the difference of the Brayburn storyline start to come through in Maddie's scenes with Howard and Athena, Angela Bassett. Unlike with Doug, Brian Hallisey, Maddie was able to face her abusive ex and put an end to him when he ultimately tried to kill her. Maddie doesn't get the same closure with Brayburn, typing to Howard, "How do you kill a monster that's already dead?" Athena doesn't answer that question for Maddie. She can't. But when she visits the dispatcher in her home, Athena tries to help Maddie realize that she's operating from a place of fear, and that's what's keeping her from doing her job. It might be the best scene of Disconnected, helped by the solid friendship between Maddie and Athena. It's good that Athena acknowledges that she never suspected Brayburn, visibly bothered by the fact, but it's even better just to see her talking to Maddie in a regular scene. Regardless of how big or small a TV cast might be, writers tend to get locked into certain scene partners, and it is a little bit rare to see variation. 911 is no exception, tending to favor established relationships when deciding how to spend its screen time. It's understandable, especially since the procedural regularly includes so many guest actors, but there's a certain spark in watching two characters that don't get to share the screen that often. Eddie's eager to fix things in Texas. He's also dealing with an unexpected setback. Eddie at the station in 911 Season 8, Episode 9. Eddie's side of Disconnected begins with him meeting a new captain for a potential job. The interview goes well, even if Eddie's potential boss isn't exactly sure whether the new hire will stick around for long. Eddie assures that he will remain in Texas, although Bobby, Peter Krauser, has made clear that Eddie can return to the 118 whenever he wants. Eddie departs with the sense that he's got a new job in the bag, splurging on a PS5 to get Christopher's forgiveness. As he later tells Buck, Oliver Stark, in a video call, Eddie doesn't get the job due to a last-minute hiring freeze. Although it's not the focus of Disconnected, Eddie's financial situation seems almost dire. He's spent all of his savings on a house that is falling apart on every level, with water leaking from the ceiling, light bulbs exploding, and shelves tumbling out of place in quick succession. It's presumably the same house that, earlier in 911 Season 8, Eddie says is all he can afford. Financial struggles aren't depicted much on television. The thinking may well be that it would pierce the escapist, aspirational bubble that the medium is meant to provide. But it is refreshing to see money not only discussed but having an actual and immediate impact on how Eddie lives his life. The immediate impact is that Eddie debates whether he should return to Los Angeles and rejoin the 118. At least then he would be able to provide for Christopher. Buck's reaction is everything. He's tempted, he pauses for a moment to consider what he should say, but he tells Eddie he should stay in Texas with Christopher. There isn't much happening with Buddy in this episode compared to recent weeks, but what does happen is meaningful on two fronts. It is meaningful that Buck is the one giving advice for a change, solidifying that his accepting of his best friend being away. It's also important, though, to just see Buck and Eddie being there for each other, a little bit removed from the speculation over whether or not they'll end up together. It has been too long since Guzman and Stark were able to just bounce off each other in a low-stakes storyline that resolves in an episode, with only glimpses and small previews occurring since the show's move to ABC. If it is the case that Buddy is going canon, they should have more scenes together. Most of those scenes shouldn't just be teasing whether or not they are in love.